So today we're going to go into day number 7 in our exploration of the Bhagavad-Gita in chapter 7 in honor of Gita Jayanti, which of course is long past, so be it. So in chapter 6, Krishna ends chapter 6 saying that the yogi is greater than the ascetic, greater than the yogi is greater than a jnani. The yogi is greater than a karmi. The yogi is greater than the tapasvi. So Krishna is obviously putting a yogi on a pedestal. But then what type of yogi? They're all what does Krishna mean by yogi? And especially when Krishna is talking about the yogi is greater than all of these other types of spiritualists. What makes a yogi greater than these other types of spiritualists? And Krishna says, yogi namapi sarvesham madgaten antaratmana. In other words, madgaten antaratmana, shraddhavan bhajate. Bhaj is to worship, to adore. Bhaj is the root of bhakti, of the word bhakti. So it's not just any yogi is greater than the tapasvi, is greater than a jnani, is greater than the karmi. No. A particular type of yogi is greater than all these others. And this particular type of yogi is Shraddhavan Bhajate Yomam. This particular type of yogi has love for Krishna. This particular type of yogi is the bhakti yogi. That's how Krishna ends the 6th chapter. That leads into Krishna continuing to describe this particular type of yogi. This yogi who engages in bhaj, this yogi who engages in bhakti. So then we go into the 3rd chapter. And Arjuna wants to know, he's curious, that what does this particular yogi know? What does this particular yogi, what makes this particular yogi unique from the other types of yogis, right? Because remember, in the 6th chapter, Krishna described the yogi who does Ashtanga yoga, right? Yama, Niyama, Pranayama, Asana Pranayama, Pratyahara, Dharana, Dhyana, and Samadhi. The yogi, Patanjali's yogi, right? To breathe in and out and sit straight, do the asanas, twists on your head. Krishna described that type of yogi. Arjuna wants to know, what type of yogi is this bhakti yogi? Where Krishna just says, Shraddhavan bhajate yomam. How this bhakti yogi is superior to all these other types of spiritualists. What about that type of yogi? What does this particular yogi know? What is the knowledge that this particular yogi has that others do not? So Krishna describes, and that's where we get into chapter 7, Transcendental Knowledge. And Krishna begins by first saying, what is knowledge? Or what is one aspect of knowledge? So then Krishna describes Prakriti, material nature, right? Earth, water, fire, air, so on. The mind and intelligence. Krishna describes how all of these things come from him, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And the devotee, this bhakti yogi, knows that these things come from Krishna. Krishna is giving a very brief description of knowledge here. Then Krishna goes on, and this is a very important part of the 7th chapter. Krishna describes 4 types of people who are not interested in spiritual life, right? Namam duskriti nomada prapadyante naradama. People who are completely ruled by their mind and senses, people who are ruled by an idea, the concept of atheism. These type of people, Krishna says, do not begin devotional service, do not even begin a spiritual process, let alone bhakti yoga. But then Krishna says something interesting, which is actually quite informative in the 7th chapter. Krishna describes 4 types of people who begin spirituality, who begin their spiritual life and begin the practice or process even of bhakti yoga. I just skipped something. Early on in the 7th chapter, this is a very important point to keep in mind when we discuss these 4 types of people who begin devotional service. In the beginning of the 7th chapter, Krishna says, out of many thousands among men, women, one may endeavor for perfection, spiritual perfection. Out of all of these persons who endeavor for perfection, Krishna says hardly one of these persons who have achieved perfection, who have achieved essentially Brahma Bhuta, who have achieved spiritual perfection, out of many thousands of them, Krishna says, hardly one of even those people know Krishna in truth, know Krishna Tattva, know the secret of Krishna. I was just listening to a video just yesterday on some individual was giving, it was on YouTube, was giving a lecture on Vedanta. And he was giving a lecture on Bhagavad-Gita, on the 2nd chapter. So I clicked it, I wanted to see what he was going on about. It was very interesting. And he was talking about, he was saying his idea was that the most important part of the Bhagavad-Gita, and he described it as the beating heart of the Bhagavad-Gita, he described it as chapter 2, text 16. And when he said that, I was quite curious. I know chapter 2, text 16, Nasato Vidyate Bhava. And I was thinking of all the verses of Bhagavad-Gita, how is chapter 2, text 16 the beating heart of Bhagavad-Gita? I never, in all my years of learning about and studying, hearing about Bhagavad-Gita, no one has ever described chapter 2, text 16 as the beating heart of the Bhagavad-Gita. Basically, the verse says that the spirit soul, there's a difference between, the wise person understands that the spirit soul is eternal and the body is temporary. That's essentially what the verse is saying. And the wise person knows this. And then the speaker went off into describing the difference between matter and spirit. And of course, that's absolutely essential, right? In fact, that is the first teaching of Bhagavad-Gita. The spirit soul is different from the material body. An essential teaching. But he was sharing that teaching from the point of view of impersonalism, Advaita. So assuming or grasping that particular verse as the beating heart of the Bhagavad Gita, it then made sense to me, understanding that he was talking from an impersonal perspective. But we know well on into the Bhagavad Gita, the mystery of the Bhagavad Gita, the secret of the Bhagavad Gita, we know is Krishna saying, surrender unto me and you will achieve perfection. That's the secret. The beating heart of Bhagavad Gita is in chapter 18, even in chapter 7, but in chapter 18, Manmanam Bhavavad Bhakto. That's the secret. That's the beating heart, Krishna says in the 18th chapter. One who explains this supreme secret to the devotees, pure devotional service is guaranteed. What secret? Parama Guyatamam. Parama supreme Guya secret. One who explains this supreme secret, the best secret to the devotees, Krishna says, pure devotional service is guaranteed. What's the secret that Krishna is talking about? The secret is one can have a loving relationship, a personal, individual, unique, loving relationship with Krishna. That verse is actually the beating heart of the Bhagavad Gita. But if you're not a personalist, if you do not have a concept of the absolute truth as being a person, that's not the beating heart. You're going to choose chapter 2, text 16, which simply says, creation is spirit, and the wise person should know this. Now, I said all that to say this, right? In the 7th chapter, come back to the 7th chapter. Krishna says, out of many thousands among people, one may take up a spiritual practice. Out of all these people, gather thousands of these people who take up a spiritual practice. Out of all of them, one of them will know the secret of Bhagavad-Gita, the secret that one can have a loving relationship with Krishna. Now let's go back to Krishna's description of these four pious people. Chaturvidhaba jantemam jana sukriti nodamuja artho jignasu artharti gyani cha bharatarshabha. Krishna says, four types of pious people, have to start off with at least being pious. Four types of pious people begin to render service. The distressed, the desire of wealth, the inquisitive, and one who is searching for knowledge of the absolute. This verse is chapter 7, text 14. So let's start with the first one. The first one is the distressed, a person who is poverty-stricken, destitute, sick. What do? God help me, right? And they come running to the mandir for some kind of puja, right? The distressed. They begin some kind of spiritual practice. The distressed, the desire of wealth. Okay, so a person may not be distressed, but they want to strike it rich, right? So Krishna is their lottery ticket. So they come and they do some puja in the hopes that they can win the lottery and get a lot of wealth. And by the way, these are legitimate reasons to begin devotional service. Absolutely. Absolutely. To Krishna. The distressed, the desire of wealth. Third, the inquisitive. All right, so I'm not distressed. I'm not poverty-stricken. I have a roof over my head. I'm not sick and diseased. I'm relatively maybe middle class or affluent. I have no money issues. I'm satisfied in that regard. But I was walking down the street in Boston and I saw the Hare Krishnas dancing down the street. I'm inquisitive. I'm pious. I know that I have a sense that there's something more to this life than eating, sleeping, going to work, and coming back. So I'm a little inquisitive. Why are these Hare Krishnas dancing around in such apparent happiness? So they begin to take up the spiritual practice. The distressed, the desire of wealth, the inquisitive, and then the fourth person, one who is searching for knowledge of the absolute truth. So this person is beyond just being inquisitive. This person is investigating. That's the difference. One is inquisitive. Oh, why are the Hare Krishnas dancing through the streets? They go to the Sunday program. The Hare Krishnas say, oh yeah, it's really nice to chant. We have a lot of fun and it makes me feel good. A person who is merely inquisitive, that can satisfy them. Okay, well, you like it. Yeah, I like to go dance at the club. They're inquisitive. They get maybe a very simplistic, limited answer. They might be satisfied with it. They may inquire a little bit more, but being inquisitive is not enough. Searching for the absolute truth. This person is investigative. This fourth person digs and digs and digs. And in digging, in their search for the absolute truth, they begin to change their behavior based on the realizations they are getting from it. That's the key difference. The distressed person, he's running to Krishna, and the Panditji, the Pujari says, do this, do that, and your disease will go away. So he changes or she changes her behavior to get that particular result. Their change of behavior has nothing to do with the realization of Krishna. It's because they want that result. The person who goes running to Krishna, because what's the second one? The desire of wealth. And they read, oh, if you do puja like this, do a yajna like this, do this type of worship, you will get wealth, you will get a beautiful wife, a wonderful husband. They change their behavior to get that particular result. It's not based on realization. Their behavior does not change because of realization. It's based on that result. And then the third one, the inquisitive person. They inquire, they get a little bit of information, limited to some extent. They may or may not change their behavior if it resonates with them, but still, it's based on they're merely inquisitive. They want, once they get their information, They have to come to a class. Okay, they change their behavior. They come to a class. They learn a little something. Once they get their their curiosity sated, nothing happens. The only reason why they changed their behavior is because to satisfy their curiosity. The fourth person, one who is searching for knowledge of the absolute truth, they're investigative. They dig, they dig, they dig, they inquire. And based on their inquiry, based on their investigation, they start to change their behavior because of the realization coming from their investigative search for the absolute truth. The verse after this one, Krishna says, those persons, the fourth person, of all those, the fourth person, very few of them even come to the point of this secret, meaning I can have a personal relationship with Krishna. Even few of the fourth rated person, the 4-star person, even that person seeking knowledge of the absolute truth, even they may not come to this parama guyatamam, this supreme secret that the individual can have a personal, unique relationship with Krishna. Even they might not come to that realization. That's why, going back to the verse earlier where Krishna says, Manushyanam sahashashu kaschid yatati siddhaye, yatatamapi siddhanam kaschin mam veti tatvata. Out of many, many thousands of people who go running to Krishna, one may seek knowledge of the absolute truth. Out of many thousands of these people who are seeking knowledge of the absolute truth, not for wealth, not because of distress, not because they're curious, out of many thousands of these people, one may get the secret that they can have a personal, individual, unique relationship with me. And this is why Bhakti Yoga is so rare. In the Nectar of Devotion, one of the 6 characteristics of Bhakti is it's extremely rare. This is why it's rare. This is one of the 6 characteristics of Bhakti given by Srila Rupa Goswami in the Nectar Devotion. It is extremely rare. Because many people, many thousands of people, first of all, many thousands of people don't even turn towards Krishna, right? 4 types of people are not even interested in spirituality from the off. Those few pious people, perhaps maybe 50% of the population, for example, 50% of the population who are somewhat interested or who are willing to turn towards spirituality, whether it's because of distress, lack of money, or the curious, out of many, that 50% remaining the population, few of them even are searching for knowledge of the absolute truth. Many are just curious. Many want money. Many want the cessation of distress and anguish. So Bhakti Yoga is very, very rare. Now, and this is the last point here. Krishna, Bhakti Yoga, the reason why Bhakti Yoga is very rare is because Bhakti Yoga is not trying to eliminate distress. Bhakti Yoga is not about getting rich. Bhakti Yoga is not even about satisfying one's intellectual curiosity to understand Krishna, right? How can we possibly understand Krishna in all of his glory? It is impossible for the living entity to know Krishna in full, in all of Krishna, in all of his opulence. That's impossible. We don't have the capacity to do that. So Bhakti Yoga is not about alleviating distress. The gopis were heartbroken when Krishna left Vrindavan. Lord Chaitanya says, crush me by your embrace. Make me brokenhearted by not being present before me. Bhakti Yoga is not about the elimination of distress. That's why few people choose it. Bhakti yoga is not about getting rich. We all know the story of Sutama Brahman. Bhakti yoga is not about satisfying our intellectual curiosity, because the knowledge of the Supreme is immeasurable. Bhakti yoga is about one thing and one thing only: having a loving relationship with Krishna. That's it. If you're not interested in having a loving relationship with the Supreme, with the absolute truth, Bhakti yoga is not for you. You're going to be disappointed. Now, having said that, let me, whoa, slow down. Having said that, Krishna does recommend that these types of people, the distress, the desire of wealth, begin Bhakti yoga, because by beginning the process of Bhakti yoga, purification does happen. Absolutely. As we know, in the previous chapter, in the 6th chapter, Arjuna said, what happens to a yogi who begins his spiritual life, but then fails, doesn't achieve perfection at the time of death? What happens to that yogi? Krishna says, don't worry. They can take up again in their next life from where they left off and continue to progress. So I'm not saying that unless you are 100% desirous of having a relationship with Krishna, I mean, having a relationship with Krishna at this stage in our life we're still wrapping our head around the fact that Krishna is on the altar, right? We have so much purification to do. Krishna is not saying, I'm not saying that we cannot start Bhakti yoga. Absolutely start it. Even if we are starting our Bhakti yoga because we are distressed, because we want a lottery ticket, or because we're just curious, definitely start the practice of Bhakti yoga. And then purification happens. The only thing that needs to be said is Bhakti yoga, the end result of Bhakti yoga, is not about eliminating distress, not about winning the lottery, and not about satisfying your intellectual curiosity. It's about one thing and one thing only: having a unique, personal, loving relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That's the secret. That's the beating heart of the Bhagavad-Gita. Next week, we'll go into chapter 8. Hari Hari.